Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Cutter webinar. My name is Rich Whalen. I'm the host of the session, and before turning it over to Cutter Senior Consultant Whynde Kuehn, I just want to tell you a little bit about Cutter and the environment of how you can ask questions, and then a little bit on Whynde herself. As you can see, here's a slide about some information on Cutter. What I want to highlight here is our access to the experts approach. We have no ties to vendors, and we don't have a team of analysts sitting in a back room churning out numbers and reports. All of our senior consultants are experts in their respective fields, and we have zero ties to vendors, so that's the benefit of the access to the experts approach. As far as asking questions during the session, you can ask questions at any time via the toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen. You can also adjust sound if you're listening through your computer, which I imagine most of you are. You can adjust it there, you can adjust it on your computer. But for questions, just on the toolbar, just type the question in where it says type your questions here portion of the toolbar, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Should your question have anything to do with the logistics of the session, or if you're having difficulties hearing, I will reply privately to you via chat. Now, a little bit about Cutter Senior Consultant Whynde Kuehn. As you can see here on the slide, it gives her information, and she's a senior consultant with Cutter Consortium's Business and Enterprise Architecture practice and principal of SE2 Consulting. She is passionate about bridging the gap between strategy and execution. Ms. Kuehn is a longtime business architecture practitioner, educator, and industry thought leader who takes a business-focused and results-oriented approach to business architecture. Ms. Kuehn has a track record of creating successful teams that become embedded into their organizations. She has developed and taught comprehensive large-scale business architecture training programs via in-person and online formats, both for the public and in-house for clients. And now I turn it over to Whynde. So welcome, Whynde.
Thanks, Rich, and thank you all for listening today. So as we all have come to know, in most industries, customer expectations have escalated greatly over time. And we know that customers, often including ourselves when we act as customers, want what they want, when they want it, how they want it, and they will go elsewhere if they cannot get it. And as a result, most organizations are reacting to those customer expectations, oftentimes requiring major transformation internally, such as changing the way the organization delivers products and services, whether that's through new channels or by delivering products in different ways, such as through service models. Organizations shift from product-centric to customer-centric business models, which can require massive transformation to the core, especially for those organizations who grew up in product silos or other silos or grew by acquisition. And organizations are reorganizing internally, such as creating customer-focused teams and introducing the customer experience design discipline to really understand the voice of the customer and to comprehensively manage the customer experience. Now, how business architecture can help to create a superior customer experience could be the topic of multiple webinars. So today we're going to focus in on just one piece, and that is how the business architecture and customer experience design disciplines work together, the mutual benefits of the disciplines, and the key integration points. And the reason why we're keying in on this is the customer experience design discipline is a key element that should ideally be in place in an organization to help us envision, create, and measure the experiences that we're looking to provide. So that's why we're focusing on that point. And throughout the webinar, we will explore some key questions like, how do these two disciplines relate? Which comes first? Which are the inputs and outputs of the other? How do the roles interact? And how do the roles interact with the business? So just to give you the punchline right away here, customer experience design and business architecture are both highly important, especially in today's world of customer expectations, organizational complexity, and our desire for agility. And so the bottom line is this: both disciplines are mutually beneficial and they are both critical to customer centricity and to transformation. In addition, an effective environment on the inside of an organization often translates to a better customer experience on the outside. So there's a critical relationship here, which people do not always see, right? They may invest a lot in the customer experience front end, not realizing how important the back end is. These are two sides of a coin, and we can't have a superior customer experience if our own internal environment is not set up to produce it. I've worked on many customer experience transformations where we actually had to focus on fixing redundancy, lack of transparency, inconsistency, lack of integration across the business unit silos in order for us to be able to deliver a seamless customer experience. So, for example, if you've ever made a call to a company that you do business with and you tried to change your address, but you keep receiving mail at the old address, that's the type of root cause issue that I'm talking about here, where parts of the organization are not integrated and it produces a poor customer experience. So we do need to focus on both of these mutually beneficial disciplines. The paper I'm citing here is from a collaboration that happened between the business architecture and customer experience communities. It produced the white paper listed here, which is available publicly on the Business Architecture Guild site, but it did establish the tie that both disciplines should be working together. So now we're going to look at benefits customer experience design provides to business architecture, and then benefits business architecture provides to customer experience design. But first, I just want to take a quick aside here to ground some things. I am making an assumption during this talk that your organization has both a customer experience design team as well as a business architecture team, and that they operate at an enterprise level across silos, which is critical to the success of both. However, I understand that may not be a reality. However, introducing these teams, and that is a whole topic of itself. So I'm just going to leave it out here that this is an assumption that you have both teams, and we can maybe answer any questions about introducing them during the Q&A. In addition, I also want to acknowledge one more thing, and that is, today I'm referring to the discipline as customer experience design, but we can and should look at it just as experience design, because deliberate design applies not only to customers, but also to employees and to partners. Okay, so just to acknowledge that as well. So now, how does customer experience design benefit business architecture? There is a very key business architecture gap that happens if we do not have a customer experience design discipline, and that is a lack of comprehensive customer direction in decision making. Now, of course, business architecture gets its direction from strategies and other business direction, which will provide input. But customer experience design really helps us to envision that experience and understand it at a detailed level, even by different customer personas or customer segments, and that is critical. So customer experience design benefits business architecture by giving us a comprehensive vision of the organization's target customers and what the end-to-end customer experience should look like from their point of view. It gives us clear direction and priorities related to customer needs, which is important for business architects to understand so they can target the value streams and capabilities that will have the most impact. Customer experience design also gives us a focal point to make decisions and govern customer-facing capabilities and value streams. And finally, it illuminates gaps and areas for improvement in the business architecture based on the customer experience needs. So now let's flip that around on the other side and ask, how does business architecture benefit customer experience design? So there is a key customer experience gap that occurs without business architecture, and that is we lack a coordinated and effective method to translate the customer experience and changes to it into initiatives. One of the biggest issues that I see is, like other teams, without a business architecture in place as the master translator, customer experience teams tend to jump from the high level design and the ideas down to projects. And when we don't have a translation in the middle, this can lead to suboptimal investments like redundant solutions, across products, or investing in things that are not a priority from an overall enterprise perspective. So, how does business architecture benefit experience design? First, it helps to inform what the focal areas should be based on enterprise strategic priorities. Because ideally, our business architecture, especially our value streams and capabilities, should be tied to business strategies and objectives, and so that gives us a good idea of our current priorities. Second, business architecture helps inform customer experience design plans by helping us understand what's currently in place, such as which capabilities do we currently have in place today, for which customer segments, which channels are they delivered through, and how well are they working. Business architecture also provides an enterprise level framework to describe what the organization does at a high level. It's a shared blueprint, a shared mental model of what we do, and that can be used as a framework to identify and plan things like customer automation and digitalization, or even business model transformation. Without the business architecture, it becomes very difficult to say, what are we doing today and how does it need to change? It's almost like we have to step back and do a bit of archaeology to be able to have those conversations. As mentioned earlier, business architecture also helps to translate our customer needs or customer experience design changes into a logical set of initiatives that will deliver them, and those initiatives are also harmonized with related changes across the enterprise where the same capabilities and value streams are being changed. Business architecture is a great framework to promote cross-business unit and cross-product thinking for collaboration, for shared solutions, and for creating overall consistency and integration from end to end, which is critical, as we know, for a seamless customer experience. And finally, business architecture also establishes a common business vocabulary applicable across all business units, which greatly simplifies our conversations and our solution design. Now, simply stated, here is how customer experience design and business architecture teams work together. So first, the people work together, and that includes experience designers and business architects. And second, we do actually associate some content produced from each discipline, and we maintain that over time, long term, the connection between those artifacts. So in terms of how we work together, ideally, business architects will inform and participate in customer design sessions, informing with ideas and informing with an idea of what the current state is and how things work. Even if a business architect is serving as a silent listener in a customer design session, that can be really, really important because they are able to hear firsthand what the customer experience should look like, act like, and feel like, so that can be later translated into business architecture changes and initiatives. On the other hand, experienced designers may inform and participate in target business architecture design and initiative definition. So experienced designers can help to guide and review the architectural changes and initiatives that are defined to ensure that they are fully meeting customer experience needs. Both roles work together to help identify improvement areas, both to the customer experience and to the internal environment, especially when it has an impact on the customer experience. So, for example, we can even score and capture this type of assessment in the business architecture. We could heat map capabilities, let's say rating them from green to red, on how well each capability is working from a customer perspective. And also, both roles work together with business leaders for customer-related direction and decision-making, just with different focuses. Experienced designers more so to validate the direction of the experience, business architects more so to validate the direction of the target business architecture that will result. And as I mentioned, there should be a concrete tie made between artifacts from experience design and from business architecture. Both disciplines create quite a number of artifacts, but the key relationship is this, and that is in our repositories, we want to capture the customer journey phase and relate it to business architecture value streams and capabilities. And I will show what that looks like in just a little bit. So now let me give you a little bit of context about where these disciplines fit within an overall end-to-end strategy execution flow. As a side note, I've done other Cutter webinars and written articles on a topic called A New Vision for Strategy Execution. So if you'd like background on the set of chevrons you see here in the vision, there is information available from Cutter on that. But for today, I'm using it as a backdrop to give us some context. And so I will just point out that we have 5 stages here: develop goals and strategy, architect changes, plan initiatives, execute solutions, and measure success. And we can picture many different instances of this flow happening here. For example, as we translate multiple strategies at different levels within our organization, as we do transformations, as we may translate large sets of regulatory changes that need to be made, and so on. And so now, for context, the customer journeys and the experience designers come in around the beginning of stage 2 here to define or refine the customer experience. That may be done in response to a strategy, so one of those instances flowing through here, or it may be done from the standpoint of we're taking a step back, we're assessing how well the experience is working, and then we're going to make changes to it, which is going to flow through the rest of the stages. But that's where the experienced designers come in. Right after that, then, that is where our business architecture comes in. And business architecture takes 3 inputs typically. 1, strategy and objectives. 2, any major business model changes. And 3, the customer experience design, vision, and changes. And architects take that input, translate it into architectural changes that are needed. So that might be a brand new capabilities needed. That might be some improvements are needed to a value stream, whatever it may be. That happens in stage 2, and then in stage 3 at the very beginning, we will bundle those changes into a set of initiatives that will execute at a more detailed level. Now, this is a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but I did put process down here as well, just for context, because people do often get confused between customer experience journeys, business architecture value streams, and business processes. But as we can see here, processes really come into play downstream once we get into execution to help us design, deliver, and increase the efficiency of the internal operating environment. So that's our perspective, our context. Now let's take a deeper look at how the artifacts fit together. I realize this is a little bit small, but it's more so an idea to show. This is an example of a customer journey. In this case, for a Rail Europe is the company it's for. And there are different types of journey templates that people use, but they will focus on similar content. As a quick side note, I'm not referring to other important deliverables coming out of experience design like customer life cycles or service blueprints or anything like that. I am focused on the journey, but there are other artifacts. So as I was saying, on a journey artifact like this, we see things like the stages or phases. In this case, you can see the gray chevrons, like research and planning, shopping, booking, and so on. We also see what the customers are doing. We see what they're thinking. We see what they're feeling, what they're expecting, what they're experiencing. And in this particular example, we can also see some opportunities for improvement across each of those journey phases listed on the bottom. So that's a journey example. Now let's switch over to business architecture and look at a key artifact there to bringing it all together. So this is a business architecture value stream example. Note that it is still focused on the end-to-end customer perspective. It is high level. It is an enterprise view that crosses products and business units, and that on purpose. But the business architecture value stream is more of a reflection of how things work, less about how it feels in the expectations of customer, like we saw in the journey, right? And because the business architecture value stream is a little bit more of how it works, but still end-to-end customer focused, it's going to be key to help us translate the customer experience into any changes that we need to make within the organization's operating environment. And we'll see that in just a bit. So what you're looking at here in this business architecture value stream, it's called Acquire Product. The value stream is triggered by a customer and their end-to-end value proposition. In other words, what they get out of this is they obtain a product. And to do that, they go through multiple different stages like initiate request, submit application, validate eligibility, finalize agreement, and receive product. Now, of course, additional detail is captured that I'm not showing here, both at the value stream level as well as at the stage level. In addition, we would also cross-map capabilities to each of the value stream stages that you see here. And value streams, in combination with the capabilities cross-mapped to them, form the absolute foundation of a business architecture and give us our ability to do impact assessment, which we will see shortly. And when we cross-map our capabilities to the value stream stages, we find that it's the capabilities that do the work, as we say, and the value stream orchestrates the flow. And of course, I could have a capability that applies in more than one value stream stage and more than one value stream overall. And so we can start to see, how do we collaborate Where do we need to build shared solutions, for example, where we might see a capability that applies across multiple value streams? So some people will ask, should customer experience design and should business architecture be treated as one discipline or two? Or people will say, should a customer experience designer do the business architecture, or should a business architect also create the journey maps and other deliverables? The answer to this question is typically no. Customer experience design and business architecture do work very elegantly as two separate but related disciplines. And that is because it separates out three things. One is the role. So having a customer experience design discipline and a business architecture discipline that work together, it allows us to leverage the strengths and interests of different people. So, for example, and of course, this doesn't apply to everybody, but overall, customer experience designers tend to be more creatives who are more design oriented, while business architects, on the other hand, tend to think more structurally and more big picture, more architecturally, of course. So that's one reason to split, is different people and allow us to leverage their strengths. The second is having two disciplines allows us to separate focus and differing levels of detail and artifacts, and allows them, because frankly, both of them are full-time jobs, so it allows us to keep it that way and introduce them at the right points in the strategy execution lifecycle, as I showed earlier. And finally, keeping them as two separate disciplines allow us to fully and distinctly leverage each discipline. So from an industry perspective, there are robust methods and techniques and tools and trainings that are available for each of these disciplines. So it is worth leveraging them fully and immersing in them fully and training people to execute them accordingly. So ideally, you would have two teams that work together closely. Just an important aside there. So now let's bring it all together. From a business architecture perspective, anytime we want to assess the impact of a strategy or a change to a product, a new product, an acquisition, other business direction, whatever it may be, it's going to go into that strategy execution lifecycle, which I showed earlier. And in the second stage, one of the most important things we do is assess impacts to our business architecture, and that's what I'm illustrating here. So when we have a change, the first thing we do is we ask which value streams are going to be impacted by that change and which stages within those value streams will be impacted. So hypothetically, let's say we have a change and it's going to impact the acquire product value stream, as we saw an example of, and the service product value stream. Next, we drill down into the stage of each of the impacted value streams, and we ask now which capabilities are impacted within those stages. And there could be any number of capabilities impacted. In this hypothetical example, we're saying that customer information management is a key capability that's impacted. And so we always go through the value stream first when we are assessing impact, because two reasons. One, it helps us understand the stakeholder context based on who's triggering the value stream. Is it a customer or is it someone internally? And second, it whittles down the world of potential capabilities that could be impacted for us to look at. So it's just a matter of ease from that perspective. And then from there, once we understand value streams impacted and capabilities impacted, the capabilities are the hub of it all. So now we have the keys to the kingdom. And assuming we've built out our full business architecture knowledge base, which is a big assumption that most organizations are working towards, but if we do have it built out, we can then consult the business architecture knowledge base to understand which other pieces of the business architecture are impacted. Those are the things listed in blue here, like which business units are impacted, which stakeholders, which products, which internal or external policies, which other business objectives, which other initiatives, and so on. And if we have our business architecture, again, specifically our capabilities, if we have it cross-mapped to other disciplines like processes, like system applications, working together with our application architecture partners, then we can also get to the brown shaded impacts that you see there and say which processes are impacted and which system applications, and from there data stores and infrastructure. So this is the thought process to get to impact analysis, and that forms the foundation for us to translate any changes or business direction, because we take all of the pieces and parts that we found to be impacted, we determine what changes are needed architecturally, we architect them and represent them in the target state business architecture, and then we organize them into a set of initiatives, top down, which are logically scoped and sequenced over time. So now let's take that thought process, which is architecture only, and now let's put the customer journeys on top of it, like you see here. So this is a retail example, and it's a conceptual diagram. We would capture more details in our repositories, but you'll get the idea. So in this example, we see some customer principles like seamlessly crossing channels and, remembering me, things like that. We see the channels impacted. We see customer journey phases of discover, shop, buy, and use. So that third row there is going to come from customer experience design. And then you can see that we've aligned those journey phases to business architecture value streams that apply. And then also we see the capabilities cross-map to each value stream as we've conceptualized here. So for example, I can see that acquire product value stream, which would come from business architecture, is cross-mapped to capabilities for message management, customer management, product info, product delivery, agreement order, payment management, and so on. I won't read all of them, but that's kind of the idea if you follow it through. And so when we now did this very powerful thing of connecting the customer journey to the business architecture, value streams, and capabilities, we have made an important tie, not just visually for people in the organization to see, but we can do a bi-directional impact assessment, such as, what if we made changes to the customer journey phase of discover? If we made experience changes there, what would it impact? We can follow that through to say that would impact the acquire product value stream, and specifically capabilities for message management, customer management, product information management, and information management. Or on the other side, what if we made some changes to the product information management capability? Let's follow it up. So now we realize that would make a change to the acquire product value stream, and product information management would also, as a capability, impact every single customer journey phase up there. So again, it's an important bi-directional impact analysis that we can do when we make changes on either side to know, do we need to adjust something? Here is another view of that. This is just flipped in a little bit different direction. So instead of having the customer journeys on the top and the business architecture value streams and capabilities on the bottom, We've just done it the other way. So this is a view where you can put the value stream on the top and show the customer journey phases on the bottom. So what you're looking at here is a value stream from an automotive company. It's take a trip, which is obviously what the customer does. It's customer facing. And below each value stream stage, which are the blue chevrons, you can see most of it's grayed out, but we are indicating, for example, which strategies are impacted, which initiatives are impacted, and so on. And then the orange and yellow that you see there is actually this company's journey phases that would be aligned. It's nice to make this tie visually for people because then they understand that the disciplines do work together, and it can also be helpful if one discipline or the other, either customer experience design or business architecture, if it's getting a lot more traction, by aligning the other to it, you can bring the other discipline along and give it more visibility and traction as well. So here's where the rubber meets the road. And I can't actually emphasize this point enough, right? We've talked up to this point about how the disciplines work together, that they should work together. But when we go back to our desks after this webinar, how do we act differently, right? What do we need to do differently? And as simple as it is, I think this artifact here can help to sum it up. So as your customer experience design teams create journey maps and other artifacts like this one that you see here, which is, by the way, a fantastic artifact, the important thing is that's the design, but we must translate that design and changes to that experience design through business architecture as the master translator. Because like I said earlier, if we jump from the big customer experience design ideas down to initiatives, we are missing all the connections in between, and we're missing the ability to harmonize any changes with anything else going on in the enterprise. And business architecture brings that because it is the master translator. And what you will see on templates like this is we have the journey on the top, and then if you see in the blue boxes on the bottom, we jump across the architecture and we're talking detail like policies and people and processes and procedures and systems and practices, which is all really good stuff, but it's all really detailed. So if you simply insert business architecture value streams and capabilities first, beneath the journeys, like I showed in the earlier slides, that will actually help you whittle down the forest for the trees so that you know, okay, if this capability is impacted, now let's go look at the processes and the people and the technology that's impacted versus kind of jumping right to the trees. So again, the real big takeaway here is we want to relate customer journeys to value streams and capabilities as the master translator because it helps see the forest for the trees. It helps us make better decisions based on overall organizational priorities because business architecture can give us that view. And lastly, it helps us to connect the dots between customer experience initiatives and other initiatives across the organization that might be making changes to the same capabilities, value streams, products, stakeholders, and so on. And so then just to say, where do we go from here? Assuming, again, you have both a customer experience and a business architecture team in your organization, the first step, if you haven't already done so, is to find each other. As I mentioned in the beginning, ideally customer experience design and business architecture should be disciplines that are orchestrated at an enterprise level across silos. But the reality is it might not work that way, or it might not work that way yet in your organization. So they might be operating in pockets across the organization. For example, a business architecture team might have gained traction in a couple business units, or customer experience design might be orchestrated out of the marketing department and maybe one other place. So first step is find each other. The second step, as basic as it sounds, is really important, and that's get to know each other, build a relationship, and just step into starting to work together. So schedule meetings with the teams that are out there from both disciplines, understand what each other does, understand who works on the team, how they work, what their current priorities are and initiatives that they are working on. Maybe you have an opportunity to work together. And then as you start building relationship and understanding more about each other, that can lead to discussions and concrete actions around integration points, inputs and outputs from each other, opportunities to work together, and so on. And as you have opportunities that come up, take them and start working through the process. So, for example, as a customer experience design might be, let's say, reworking a journey or parts of a journey, align the business architecture value streams and capabilities to that, and then start translating those changes through the architecture into initiatives together. Cross-map your artifacts, as I was showing in pictures today, but the information will ideally be captured in a knowledge base that you can maintain over time. And so again, as we saw, the key relationship is customer journey phase to business architecture value stream stage and capabilities. And share visuals of the cross-mapping with each other, with others, so that they know these disciplines do work together and here's how. And then eventually over time, as you've been working together, it is possible that you'll identify better ways of working together. Maybe you've identified some areas where you have some overlap or improvements in the way you work. And then update your role definitions and your responsibilities. Update your activities and the artifacts that each team creates in order to best leverage each other and not produce any duplication. So with that is the end of our content for today. Just a little bit on resources. What you see here are 3 relevant articles from the Cutter archives. There's one called Making the Customer Experience Real with Business Architecture, which is an overview of what we covered here today. There is another article that specifically describes the difference between customer journeys, value chains, value streams, and business processes. So there we're covering 3 disciplines: experience design, business architecture, and business process management. And then there's another one on digital transformation. And there is an offering listed there as well. So with that, Rich, I will turn it back to you for some questions.
Okay, so I guess, Whynde, you can take a little breath here, take a drink of water, and as a reminder, everyone, how you can ask questions, just go into the questions area of the toolbar on the screen, and we'll be able to read off questions. So the first questions that have come up, it's where should such teams ideally reside in an organization structure? Where do such teams actually reside? And what are some directional sizes of teams?
Got it. Okay. So that's a really key question, and let's assume we're in a large organization here. That'll be my frame of reference as I answer. So, where should the teams reside? As I mentioned, ideally they are situated so that they can operate at an enterprise level across business units. Both of these disciplines work best when we think end-to-end, whether that's end-to-end customer experience or end-to-end business architecture, because without that, we are creating potentially fragmented customer experiences and potentially redundant, non-integrated business and IT environments. So these do need to operate at an enterprise level. So where I would say they ideally should report, and you'll need to filter my answer according to what's real and what's relevant to your organization, but ideally on the business side. So both of these things are business driven, and ideally they would report to a business leader that cares about 1, cross business unit view, and 2, good end-to-end strategy execution. Somewhere like a strategy leader, transformation leader, innovation leader, shared services, something like that, where you're going to get that view across. Otherwise, it's also hard for experienced designers and business architects to be able to operate and do what they need to do if they're located within one business unit as well. So that's the ideal reporting. To add on to that, that does not mean, okay, let me mention one other thing. If you have a centralized team like that too, you can have your practices sort of like a center of excellence. They can be centralized there, okay, not just people. But having said all that, that does not mean that you cannot also have experienced designers or business architects that report to other business units or other product areas throughout the organization. It's just the point that everybody needs to work together and we need to be orchestrated at an enterprise level. And a side note for business architecture team, if it is residing on the business side, reporting to a business unit leader, we are still part of the enterprise architecture umbrella. So we still have to make the tie back to our IT architecture disciplines to make sure we have a strong enterprise architecture presence as well. So that's the should report. The second part of the question is, where do these teams actually report? And I did allude to that a little bit. Sometimes this is done perfectly in organizations, and sometimes you will find business architecture and customer experience design in pockets. As I mentioned, I often will find some sort of a customer experience design presence in marketing, and that's good and wonderful, but it does need the enterprise perspective added to it. And then the question on size. That one's a little tricky to answer, but I will say based on reality, neither team, customer experience design or business architecture, tend to be very large teams. They are small but mighty teams, people who look across the enterprise. Part of that's a function of both disciplines are continuing to come into their own. But even if you start as a small team, the answer to your ideal size is going to depend on how much change you're making. So, for example, if you have, 5 business transformations happening in your organization, then you probably need a lot more business architects and potentially more customer experience designers as well. So that's it's going to be a function of what you have going on as well. Back to you, Rich.
Okay, the next question is, how is customer experience evolving with time as some of the emerging technologies like AI, data analytics, intelligent automation, sensors, and edge computing, computer vision, et cetera, are becoming more matured, and businesses have started to explore possible applications, benefits, and use of things like quantum computing, et cetera?
So this is a really important question to draw out, I think, an overall concept. And I'm not meaning to steer away from the technologies, but what I do see is that sometimes our organizations struggle to put all of these technologies into place and into a useful context. And so regardless of what those technologies are, right, and you listed a fantastic group of them for us to consider, regardless of what the technologies are, we still need to have the experience design through journeys, life cycles, and so on, and the business architecture in place, documented and used, because without those things, we're just talking the technology. So what I'm saying is these two disciplines give us the framework to understand what is the experience like today and what is our internal environment like today, and where do we have the greatest opportunity to plug in those technologies to help us meet our customer experience goals or to even help us be more effective internally. So I think that the key question, because I watch a lot of organizations still honestly getting their head around all these technologies fit. But part of why I think they struggle is because they don't always have these frameworks fully in place to be able to say, where do they fit? How do we leverage this? Or if we have a new technology or a new innovation idea, did we realize that it can also apply in this value stream and that value stream and, for other capabilities? So I think that's the takeaway that I would encourage here, that we use these frameworks as a way to answer those questions within our own industries and organizations.
Okay, the next question says, could the two separate artifacts of the customer journey map and business architecture value stream map be replaced by a service blueprint, since the latter captures both the customer and company views?
Good question. That's a great question. And so obviously you'd still want to connect to the value streams and the capabilities up to the service blueprint. I think it's a matter of what's useful and what level of detail. And that's also why you've heard me stress throughout the webinar, right? It's still be looking at customer experience, enterprise discipline, so that you have the forest for the trees. And even if you're mapped up to a higher level life cycle or journey, you can drill down into more detailed things, but you could certainly make the tie at a detailed level of the service blueprint as well. Back to you, Rich.
Sorry, I forgot to push the unmute button, so I wasn't disturbing when I started reading off the next question. Okay, so the next question is, what about experience mapping? They are of a higher level than customer journey and give an overview of the general experience of the customer. From what I read, they better support cultural change among organizations. Do experience map belong in experience design teams as well, or in BA teams?
And sorry, what was the last question about the teams? Do they belong in what again?
It says, do experience map belong in experience design teams as well, or in BA teams?
I would love for the participant to be able to clarify a little bit more on experience mapping, but assuming maybe that's challenging in this format, let me just kind of give a generic answer to that. If it's experience related, I would absolutely keep it with the experience design team, not business architecture. And that's for multiple reasons. And one is because the personalities and the skills and the orientation is typically different. And second, business architecture has a very specific defined ecosystem of domains from an industry perspective, and it's not in there. So I wouldn't put it with the business architecture team. I am assuming when you're talking about experience mapping that it is a higher level artifact, as you said. And if that is the case, I guess I don't know why you couldn't make the tie there. Same thing, value streams and capabilities. The only thing I would counsel, not having the exact same idea in my mind as what you're speaking, is just make sure that experience map allows you to get actionable for change. So when we saw that, simple example where I had the journeys map to the values and the capabilities, you could kind of drill down and say, if the shop journey phase changes, what does that mean for the business architecture, and vice versa? As long as you can follow that through, because we need to know that. If the experience map was at a really high level and didn't give us that, then I might say you want to map to both things, would be the advice there. Just a quick note, I don't think this was intended, but if the experience mapping that you speak of, if that's more like user experience, user interface, that's downstream, and I would say that would be part of neither of these two roles, because they're both playing upstream. If you think back to the strategy execution life cycle, that would be stage 4. Back to you, Rich.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one more before we have to wrap things up. And it says, given the speed and iterative cycles in which you need to work, these approaches seem time-consuming. What are your suggestions to apply these methods to modern and agile ways of working?
Great question. So, two things. One is that how we go about everything is extremely important. We can make business architecture and experience design take a really long time. We can boil the ocean, or we can accelerate ways of working by framing out. Let's just take a real simple example. In business architecture, you can frame out your high-level capabilities and go deep in certain areas if you don't have a capability map in place to start doing things like this. For experience design, we can, rough out, a customer life cycle and decide the journeys that we focus on. So you can step into this. And I think the guidance is across that strategy execution life cycle that I showed with the 5 chevrons. You do just enough, just in time. You don't do more than that. That's a little bit of the art of both these disciplines to do that, but that's the first part. The second part is a much bigger topic, and I know Cutter has just lots and lots of information about agile approaches and architecture and agile approaches. In fact, there was a recent business technology journal on that we just released. But the idea is architecture and experience design and the idea of agility are a little bit of a yin and a yang. It's these seemingly contradictory opposites that actually, even though it seems like it's time consuming and it slows things down, a good experience design and a solid target state architecture actually helps us to slow down a bit to speed up later so that we know what we're working towards, a common vision of the future. A little investment up front to figure out where to focus, again, on those things, helps us to not execute the wrong things later that are misaligned with priorities and redundant and so on. So both of these things, I think, bigger topics, but just a quick answer to a very important question. Back to you, Rich.
Okay, so we've run out of time, so I just want to point out to anyone, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to have relayed to Whynde for replies, you can definitely send those on to me, to rwhalen, that's WHELAN @cutter.com, or you can send those to sales@cutter.com, and we'll forward those on to Whynde for her replies. As you can see on the screen right here, there's a slide on our upcoming webinars. Feel free to go to the website, our website, cutter.com, and check out the full explanation of those sessions, but you are welcome to attend those as well. So I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I hope you found the session of value. Whynde, thank you again for your time. It was very insightful, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed it.